it's free cash flow, because if I'm collecting my money faster from my customer, correct, I don't need a loan from a bank. That means the customer is my bank.
These businesses that really need it, they can unlock cash that is already inside the business.
Same thing with my suppliers. If I'm paying my suppliers later, then my suppliers are basically financing me, and it costs me nothing.
Right.
That means you indirectly, being the nice customer, you're financing not only your suppliers but also your competitors.
Do you think like the next wave of enterprise AI is going to be less about generic models and more about the proprietary data?
First, private AI models, specifically for sensitive data, highly anonymized and not shared with everybody else.
Right.
I believe this is one of the key features. But the future will be where an agent is negotiating with another agent, on average identifies about 10% of free cash flow. And this is how these companies were fueling their growth.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Brayne Cast. I'm Shane with my co-host, as always, Taha. We have a special guest, Oliver, today. This episode is brought to you by Brayne AI. We help businesses automate their workflows, sales funnels, and move into the age of AI. Welcome, Oliver.
Hi, nice to meet you, and very excited to be today in your podcast.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on, Oliver. Welcome back, everybody. So, Oliver is the CEO of Calculum AI, and he's a supply chain finance expert with over 20 years of experience and a founder of Swiss Commercial Capital. He's also the author of 2 books on supply chain finances, and now the leader of a platform helping companies unlock working capital by optimizing payment terms with data and AI. So, Oliver, today we want to talk to you about, how AI, data, and payment term intelligence can unlock hidden cash inside supply chains without, companies needing to take on new debt. So,
Yes, no, it's as you said, it's an important topic for me since the last say 20 years working on that. And to explain it in a simple term, so I would say every company has 3 main goals, correct? One is increasing sales. The other one is improving profitability, so by reducing cost, being more efficient. And the third one is having more cash on the bank account, so improve the liquidity. Now, when you look at liquidity or cash flow, again, there's a few options for a company to do so. One is increasing sales and being more profitable so that you generate more liquidity in your bank account, which is not always easy especially for companies in stagnating markets, or companies which are pretty far along their journey. So where they have competing products with other peers in the market. So increasing sales is not always a very good option or an easy option. The second one is much easier, is for some companies, is to get a loan from a bank. Obviously, there you have to pay interest, and the interest rates are pretty high, as we all know. And the third one, which is what Calculum is focusing on, is to improve your cash to cash cycle. So basically, there are 3 options. Either you get paid earlier from your clients, so you're reducing your collection time of your payments. The second is you reduce your inventory, so you improve efficiencies in your warehouse. And the third one is you optimize your payment terms to your suppliers. And this is what Calculum is focusing on. So helping organization improve and optimize their payment terms with their supplier.
Yeah, most
And
people think of cash flow as something tied to sales, expenses, or financing.
yes,
But at Calculum, you all are focusing on payment terms as a major cash flow lever. Why do so many companies overlook this?
I would say we see that all the time. Is payment terms is always an afterthought, a second thing, because on the sales side, if you close a deal, you're mainly focusing on how much money you will make, not when you will get paid, correct? Or when you pay a supplier, you're more focusing on, hey, I get a great deal, I got a rebate or a discount, correct? I pay less than everybody else, but you forget how fast you have to pay your supplier. And this time has a cost, which is your cost of capital. So how much you can do with that money on your bank account, you know. And most people forget about that. You're right.
Good
Right.
point.
And once people start seeing these payment terms as that cash flow lever, the next question then becomes, how big is this opportunity really? Right? They start asking themselves that question. So, you came from a supply chain finance and trade finance background before building Calculum. What did you see in the market that made you realize that this needed to become a whole data platform and not just, some other financing solution?
Yeah. So first of all, you mentioned before that many today's market, they don't see or they have not realized the importance of this topic in terms of their cash to cash cycle or improving their payment terms. They always think that as sales or profitability. But you can see today the most successful companies in the world, most of them we know, like Apple, Amazon, etc., they gain this massive market share and growth by using free cash flow. And it's free cash flow. And how it works is basically you have either your suppliers financing yourself, your operations, or your customers by reducing your payment terms from your customers or by increasing your payment terms with your suppliers. And this is how these companies were fueling their growth. Now, obviously, not every company is operating by itself, correct? So first thing is you have competitors that might doing the same, and you have suppliers on one side and customers. For them, it has the opposite effect, correct? If you pay somebody later, for them it's their receivables, and then they have to wait longer to get paid. So with that in mind, the data aspect is super important because you have to be aligned with what your peers are accepting or offering as payment terms, and you also have to understand what effect does it has on your counterparties, and that is the importance to include data and data analysis to that, so you can make um, the perfect negotiations, the perfect improvements of your cash flow. Now, you mentioned before financing. Yes, I come from the financing world, which in trade finance, as the word says, or supply chain finance, you're financing supply chains or trades between buyers and suppliers, has still huge growth potential. The only thing what I have seen in the past is that obviously it has finance in the word. And when finance is involved, then you always have to look at the risk appetite, the capacity in financing or funding in specific currencies or jurisdictions. And then usually the scope of offering this financing is limited to a few larger organizations or to a few specific trades. But as we know, there are so many companies, especially middle market organizations, where they have usually more needs to finance cash flow and less access to get it. So this is why we created Calculum to provide this transparency and provide these insights to companies to improve their working capital.
Right. And what did you find was really broken about the traditional approach to financing working capital?
It's not broken, it's just limiting the scope, especially, and we see that all the time. The companies which are doing well in general, in terms of their financial health, in terms of their cash flow, basically the ones which don't need it, they have access to it, and the ones which are really need, they don't get access to it. So it's like a vicious cycle.
Right.
And data has no price. Data has no aspect of risk. I just provide insights. I'm not taking risk on a company. And what we have seen, that by having access to this information, because when you deal about payment terms, it's about negotiation, correct? You negotiate the price, you negotiate when you get paid or when you pay somebody. And in every negotiation, having data or information on your counterparty is crucial to make a good deal. And this is where we see that even without financing, you can improve by a lot the balance sheets of these organizations.
So the idea is, sorry, Shane, you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay. So you're saying like the idea is that instead of, borrowing money, these businesses that really need it, they can unlock cash that is already inside the business.
Yes.
Is that
It's
kind of right? Okay.
yeah,
That
exactly.
makes sense.
So it's
Could you
why it's
maybe
again.
walk through something? Yep.
By simply
Sorry, it's why.
adjusting payment terms, right?
Yes, exactly. To
Either payments coming
again,
in
it's
or payments going out.
exactly. It's basically it's free cash flow, because if I'm collecting my money faster from my customer, correct? I don't need a loan from a bank. That means the customer is my bank, correct? Because they pay me earlier. They give me a loan. Same thing with my suppliers. If I'm paying my suppliers later, then my suppliers are basically financing me, and it costs me nothing. It's free cash flow.
Yeah.
At a certain
Wouldn't
limit.
you,
Obviously, if you
in most cases,
if you
have an added balance to pay the supplier later?
yes,
I thought,
exactly.
wouldn't
So
you?
good point.
Go ahead.
Good point. If you over stretch it, then there's two things which can happen. It's because just by increasing payment terms, you don't need any intelligence. The key is that you know how far you can go, because if you go too far, then either your supply goes bankrupt, because if everybody does that, then they don't have money on the bank account to pay the salaries, to invest in growth, in R&D, etc. The second, which is way more likely what happened if you overstretch it, is they will just price it in. So they will calculate what is the cost of financing of my capital, and they will price it in into the goods and services they are selling to you. Correct. So the key is to know exactly how far you can go and what is acceptable or accepted in the market. And to give you a different perspective, as I said before, this is looking at you versus your direct counterparties, your clients and your suppliers. However, there is also your competitors, correct? And I always mention, if you, for example, pay your suppliers earlier than everybody else, okay, meaning you're the nice customer, and maybe you say, look, I have enough cash, I'm doing great, but that means you are financing your suppliers, correct? You're acting as a bank, you give them a free loan because you're paying them earlier. However, what we have seen in the market is that these suppliers are not saying like, thank you, and I give you a better pricing. No, they are using this additional liquidity to be able to accept longer terms from other customers.
Right.
That means you indirectly, being the nice customer, you're financing not only your suppliers, but also your competitors. And this is why, again, Apple, Amazon, all these companies which are so successful, they're using that as strategic differentiator or a competitive advantage.
So it's important to make it a win-win, kind of like using game theory. You don't want to also go too heavy on the negotiation side. Is there some sort of simple example you could walk us through, like the Campbell soup and the Nestle style example you mentioned in our pre-podcast, where one buyer discovers that a supplier is accepting different payment terms than a different customer?
Sorry, I lost you before. Could
You gotta
repeat your
speak up, Taha.
question?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like maybe if you can give a simple example, like the Campbell soup and Nestle example that you mentioned before, like where one buyer discovers that a supplier is accepting different payment terms to another customer, for example. Does that make sense?
Yes. So again, when it comes to information or data, everybody wants to have the insights, but nobody wants to share it, correct? So, and in terms of this game theory, it's very important to have this insight to gain a competitive advantage. So how you solve it is you get indication on what is on average or third quartile accepted by your suppliers without knowing exactly who are the other customers' name. Like just an example, Nestle, which is not our client, but if you just Nestle is a known name, as we all know, in the food and beverage market. If Nestle knows what their suppliers are accepting from other very large multinational food and beverage companies, then this could be helpful not only to improve their payment terms, but even if you know that you're paying somebody earlier, then you can also use that in your negotiation for better pricing, because you can calculate, okay, maybe I'm paying these suppliers 20 days earlier than everybody else. So what is this financing cost me? Like this 20 days, I'm financing this supplier. So you can add that in your negotiation when you're buying goods and services from the suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes beyond that, so it's not just simple that. You also need to know, okay, if maybe this supplier is unique, maybe they're selling a very specific good or product which I need. So what is their market share of this supplier for this product? So is it the seller's market or is it the buyer's market? Then the other thing you need to know is, okay, my spend, how much does it represent in terms of total sales for this particular supplier? So how much leverage do I have, right? Or another thing is, do I have alternatives? So what are the alternative vendors in this market which selling different products, and how easy is it to switch between one product and to the other one? I always use the example SAP and Oracle. Obviously you can switch, but it's very difficult to switch your ERP system from SAP to Oracle, so it takes time.
Yeah.
And then the last point is that there's regulations for particular products, for in particular countries, in particular industries. So you also have to be aligned with these regulations when it comes to payment terms.
I'm sure you
So
could
all that,
also just use the threat of switching suppliers as a negotiation tool.
100%, yes. And but obviously the supplier does the same thing. So they will have, if they're good at that, prepare themselves on how easy it is for their buyers to switch and what payment terms other peers of the suppliers are
Competitors, yeah.
offering to other companies. So at the end, look, it's all about having information available. But I can tell you, the companies which are the most successful, and it's interesting, when we started the company, naturally we looked at what are potential prospects, correct? So who would be companies which have the biggest needs for our solution to improve their payment terms. So we analyzed the whole market, mainly in North America and Europe, and we identified the companies which are doing the worst, which have the worst payment terms, which naturally would be the ones which would be very good prospects. And then actually it was the opposite. So these companies, they are either, they have what we mentioned at the beginning, they have very little knowledge. So they only think about cash flow in terms of sales and profitability, or they don't care, or they are in a market which is difficult to optimize payment terms. But what we have seen is the companies which have already the best payment terms, they are always looking to improve it further because they understand that this is their competitive advantage. This is how they fuel their growth, through free cash flow.
That does make a lot of sense. I think it gives a good overview and lays out all the cards that can be played on the negotiation table. I wanted to talk about your algorithm that's being used, right? You made an important distinction in our pre-call that for like algorithm or calculation engine is not just a black box AI model or an API to one of these LLMs like ChatGPT or Claude. So why is that important, right? You said that you can't just say that, oh, why'd you make this decision? And the answer is, well, because the AI told me to. It has to be very precise. So why is that important as well when it comes to how the company negotiates with the suppliers or the insights?
Okay. So to answer your question, let me just think about your question. Okay, got it. So yes, you're totally right. When it comes to payment terms or negotiation, we have seen that using just the AI does not work. And look, we are speaking every day with procurement people. So basically, the teams which are purchasing and are in daily contact with suppliers, and they know their suppliers inside out. They have specific category managers who were specifically negotiating with a category like transportation or indirect spend or chemicals. So they are the specialists for this particular category. They know the pricing, the products, they know the suppliers. So when they negotiate, they cannot have as an answer like, yeah, it's just AI. It's just 60 days because AI said so. No, it doesn't work like that. Because when they negotiate, they need the different nuances and the different argumentations to counteract. And it's like, I always say, it's like a chess game. You start with an opening of a communication or a discussion. You see the response, and then you use your second, maybe counter proposal, but this is based on information, and you need to make the point when speaking or negotiating with your supplier why it is like that and what is your source, what is the information behind that, and not just like this is AI. The second point why we are not using AI specifically for these payment terms is AI doesn't have it. So today, everybody listening to the podcast, they can make the test of asking ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude what payment terms they should apply with the name, but the responses are very poor and very general because they don't have this information. Today, this information sits in every company's ERP system. So you don't have it, and you need to know very specific what terms the supplier are accepting, because it's not just general in the transportation, in the logistic, you should have applied that. It's sometimes very specific to the country, sometimes very specific to this company or to the product you're purchasing. Because as I said before, for specific products, you have companies that have maybe bigger market shares, or they're maybe financially not so stable. So maybe you have to offer them earlier payment terms because you don't want that they go out of business. So it's very specific what you need to know on these payment terms, and AI cannot offer that today.
Right, especially the public LLMs. Yeah, I can definitely see that. You need each company's own data, and then, like you said, you need to know which jurisdiction they're in and really know all the nitty gritty. And it's also blocking out everything else, right? You don't want the AI going and searching other jurisdictions. You want it only focused on the one that's pertinent. Where do you find that, AI helps you, and where do you deliberately avoid the use of AI?
Yes. So maybe let's answer the second question. So where we are not using it and where we cannot use it is for the core, what I mentioned before, for the payment terms calculation. And the reason is we are dealing with very confidential information, and we are legally not allowed to use it. And secondly, we don't want to feed these general or large LLMs because then the information is out, right? And so first, we're not allowed, and even if we would be allowed, we will not do it. So how we use AI or LLMs is, once we receive a company in our database, then how we use LLMs is we enrich these company profiles. So by industry, rating, commodity, financial information. So to understand who is behind this company, right? To then get more information to find these different argumentation. As I mentioned before, it's very important to understand how financially strong or weak your counterparty is, because it will have a counter effect when you are improving your payment terms on your supplier or your customer. So all that plays a role, and this is how we enrich usually these supplier profiles. Now, our platform has so much information on counterparties, so customers and suppliers, that sometimes for the negotiator or the user of the platform, sometimes it's overwhelming, correct? And also to know what information should I use first, where are my low-hanging fruits, where should I start first, with whom, my negotiation. And for that, we have developed an internal AI solution, which is kind of like a co-consultant or advisor next to you, which helps you identifying who you should go first, how you should start your negotiation, and support you in this journey.
Right. Yeah, everybody talks about the AI models themselves, but I think your business is a good example of where the data moat may matter more than the models.
I totally agree.
Right.
Look,
Yeah, and you're sorry, you had something to say?
yes, like everybody, we are fascinated. Every week something is happening, correct, on the AI front, all these tools and not just like creating nice or funny pictures, but like really useful tools. And then you see a week later they're replaced by another tool which is even more
Yeah.
powerful. But at the end, it's always the same information behind. It's not unique data which nobody has access. And this is, I think, where we see a difference. Is we are very fortunate. We receive constantly new data, because it's not only having the data, it's also having updated data, correct? So today,
Mhm.
Calculum receives on average per month between 150,000 and 200,000 companies being uploaded to the platform every month.
Wow.
So that means, and these are not just the large organizations, these are smaller suppliers or customers, let's say in Bangladesh, in Mexico, in Colombia, privately owned companies where you don't have access to this information. And we are fortunate, we are constantly feeding this database, obviously with anonymized information, but it helps you then to have these insights when negotiating terms.
Right, yeah. Because this, highly sensitive supplier and customer data that you're dealing with, I think it really shows the limitations of these public LLMs, especially in these enterprise environments. Do you think like the next wave of enterprise AI is going to be less about generic models and more about the proprietary data?
Yeah, I think there will be more first private AI models specifically for sensitive data, and AI models which you can understand, where you have a model behind where you can strip down the layers and you can somehow understand how it works. And yeah, and which is built on data which is highly confidential, highly anonymized, and not shared with everybody else. So I
Right.
believe this is one of the key features. The other thing which I think is already happening now, especially looking at B2B trades and how companies in the business worlds will use AI, is agents. So that we will have built-in agents which are communicating between each other. Right. The first step is what we are building now, as I mentioned before, is a negotiation agent where you can use this agent to outsource the negotiations with your suppliers or your customers. But the future will be where an agent is negotiating with another agent. And
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Yes.
It's just going to be agents fighting back and forth on the negotiating table.
Yes. Yes. But also there, how AI started, as we all know, it learns from human behavior and human
Yeah.
generated data. So again, having just the payment terms or having everything around these payment terms, like the credit rating, the regulations, all that, it's something, the core is very useful. But when it comes to negotiation and building these agents, you need to know human behavior when it comes to negotiations, real information, like why this time the negotiation didn't work, and another time I was successful in negotiating my payment terms. Correct. So all that, having this feedback loop from real negotiations, is core as additional information to create these agents.
Right. And I think that would probably be a bit of a challenge as well with these AIs is, how do you really make them understand human body language and an emotion to that level? Where it's not just about what was said, it's also about how it was said. So yeah, that
Yes.
you bring up an interesting point there as well. And yeah, really, the AI advantage isn't just about the model, it's the quality and the uniqueness of the data behind it. And that's why data is king in the modern day and age as well. And these companies are fighting for both how much data and the quality of data that they train their models on. Coming to your company, so I saw on your website it says you don't compete with companies, you compete with their supply chains. So what do you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a shift. We have seen that. I don't want to always mention COVID, but we have seen that in the past, where companies are successful, but then suddenly they have disruptions in their supply chain. And if you manage your supply chain the right way, and we see that again now with the Strait of Hormuz, then you gain a competitive advantage. The same thing what I mentioned before with Apple and Amazon. If you use the data and your supply chain again in your advantage, then you gain a competitive leap, because you use your supply chain as a way to finance your operations. You use your supply chain to reduce the risk. You use your supply chain to develop new products, to open new markets. So this is the key. I see the key shift where companies are not just looking at their own four walls, but they're looking at beyond, how they involve their suppliers in their growth, how they involve their customers in their growth. And the next step we see already, many companies, is not only the first tier suppliers or the first tier buyers, because this is usually, I mean, nothing is easy, but the sophisticated companies, they have information on the first tier and buyers and suppliers. The key is having information on the second tier suppliers, second tier buyers, because usually there's a domino effect, correct? If something happens, it's not your suppliers, it's the suppliers of the suppliers, or the suppliers of the suppliers of the suppliers. And then you have a ripple effect down the supply chain, and suddenly you don't understand why you don't have access to these goods and services, and then you cannot sell it to your customers. Also, right now, what we see and what we will introduce very shortly is, where a lot of companies which are buying goods and services, they get a lot of phone calls from the suppliers saying like, hey, we have to increase pricing. Why? Because we have to increase pricing by 10% because labor cost, transportation cost, logistics, because of the oil price, correct? Or maybe I'm buying helium from my suppliers and they're stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. So all these arguments, but you need to know, is this correct or not? So what we are developing now, very soon bringing to the market, where we have already tested it with a lot of clients, is where you can enter what are you purchasing, let's say a tire, if you're an automotive manufacturer, and it tells you exactly the breakdown, what goes into this product in terms of commodity, labor cost, transportation, etc., and tells you if for each individual kind of ingredient which goes into the product, how is the pricing development now and in the future, so that you can then counteract and say, no, it's not 10%, it's actually only 6%. But you have data to prove it.
Right. Just goes to show how, how important intelligently designed supply chains and finance management is. It's not just about the product or the product marketing and the brand. So, you also mentioned for Calculum an interesting challenge, and honestly, it's not the worst issues that you can have, right? You said Calculum has landed major enterprise clients, but the mid-market has been a little bit tougher for you to get on as clients, and they're the ones that actually may be the faster movers as well. So why is that such an important segment for you?
First of all, when I plan to do something, or when I say something, I usually try to stick to it, right? And when I found out Calculum, the key thesis was, as I mentioned before, is not offering the same solutions to the large corporates, the multinationals, which have access to financing, which have already well-run supply chains. So I saw a huge opportunity to offer the solution and this transparency and competitive advantage using data for the mid-market, like companies, I would say, 200 million to $3-4 billion in annual revenue. And so far, we ended up with the same huge, massive companies in the world, which are our clients, which is good. I mean, we have we serve, I would say, out of the top 10 pharmaceutical company in the world, I think we serve more than 5 of them. Food and beverage, similar picture. Retail, telecom, oil and gas, so all the major companies. The problem with that is, as we all know, working with very large companies has some of its challenges. Their decision process takes longer. There's way more people involved, but we have the brand recognition. We're working with the largest supply chains in the world, and we have so much data. But now we really want to offer the same insights to smaller organizations, because it's the same process, correct? You have to negotiate with somebody else, and data can help you be more efficient and be more successful. There's just a small limit to that. Obviously, if you are too small, basically in this negotiation between a buyer and a supplier, if you are the small counterparty, you have less leverage. So then usually the data doesn't help you because you are too small to make a change. But I would say, depending on the industry, 200 to 500 to $1 billion companies are in the right spot to make use of this information. And usually what we have seen with the very large multinational clients, which we have today, the platform on average identifies about 10% of free cash flow. Meaning, if you are uploading 100 million of spend volume, then the platform identifies about 10 million free cash flow, which you can unlock or optimize by just aligning your payment terms to what the suppliers are offering to other companies.
So about 10%.
Roughly about 10%, yes.
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, like these large enterprises would know how important working capital is and how strategic it is. But these mid-market companies may have the same exact opportunity you're saying, but I guess they just don't have the internal or might not necessarily have the internal resources to find it. So that's where you can really come in and help them.
Exactly. And as I said, there's a lot to digest or to get. It's not only about payment terms, which they for sure they don't have. Nobody has that, to know what your counterparty is offering to others. But also they don't know about the credit risk assessment. So basically, how risky is your supply chain? Okay. How strong are your suppliers? What are alternative suppliers? What are the regulations in some countries and then all these changes, the changes in the regulations, the changes in the credit risk of your suppliers, the changes in payment terms in specific industries, the changes in pricing dynamics, as we said, with the conflicts or limitations, because of weather or because of political tensions. So all that, for sure, they have no access.
Oliver, I'm curious, what is your current strategy for trying to client acquisition as far as these mid-tier $200 million to $1 billion clients that you're looking to work with? How do you acquire these kind of clients?
Yeah, so the good news is for them, it will and is the same product offering, the same service as for the larger organization. So it's not like a different product, it's the same. Now, to your question, how we get in touch with these companies, it's not so simple, because so far we have been very successful with larger organizations via conferences, or we also we also sell our platform to financial institutions, to large consultancy companies and fintechs, where they're offering financing to these companies. So they outsource the analytics to us. This is how also we get in touch with a lot of large organizations. But when it comes to mid-market companies, smaller companies, as you mentioned, it's so far we have not seen specific conferences they go or how to get in touch with them. So we still have to find out.
Do you have targets in mind? Like, do you have specific companies, or it's just a broad range? You're just looking for a price? I'm just trying to understand,
Yes.
like the process a little bit. Like, do you have specific company targets, or are they just companies that work within specific price ranges?
So the good news is we don't have any particular limitation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of industry, every company could be and is interested in obviously improving their cash flow, improving their payment terms. We have even worked with financial institutions where we are analyzing their payment terms, consultancy companies, because it's direct and indirect spend. So everybody is purchasing computers, legal services, AWS, Microsoft, all these licenses. So even there, you can improve your payment terms. So there is no limitation in terms of industry where these buyers are operating. There's no limitations in terms of industries and countries where the suppliers are located, and the same thing also countries where the buyer is located. So it's pretty wide open. Now, the persona or the people which are mostly interested in this topic for smaller organizations is usually obviously finance, the CFOs, the treasurer, and then purchasing, procurement, and if we look at the other side, the salespeople. And then when it comes to pricing, so obviously the pricing can be adjusted based on the size of the organizations and then how much we unlock. Let's say for a smaller organization, maybe it's like 1 or 2 million. For larger, we're speaking about hundreds of millions. So obviously there, the pricing to access the platform and our solutions and the data is obviously adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
And you take a percentage of the savings? Like, if you save a company $10 million, would you take like 1%, or like how does that part work?
Yeah, good question. So we have two pricing models. One is simple because we like it to make it simple always, not like where you need a 1 hour discussion about how the pricing is built. So the standard pricing is an annual subscription where you have a few users which can access the platform. You can upload as many suppliers as you want. Usually there's a limit at around 20,000 suppliers, all right? And then you have access to different modules where you can also analyze the way how it impacts financing, adding financing or virtual cards or supply chain finance to this calculation. But usually the standard is a fixed fee paid annually. And then to your point, we're also offering a pricing model which is based on success, which we like a lot. So every time the client improves their payment terms and generate free cash flow, we get a small percentage from that. So basically, if the client wins, we win.
Yeah,
Right.
we have a similar pricing model in our company. That's why I was curious.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think like us, Calculum, it sounds like is also very flexible with who you work with and how you work with them as well. And it makes sense, it's just applicable to all broad range of niches and industries. So we're coming up to the end of the episode now, and I wanted to ask you, where do you think this, optimization of working capital is heading over the next 5 years? Will every CFO eventually need an AI-powered payment term intelligence the same way, like, every sales team nowadays needs CRM data?
Yeah, I believe so. The end solution which we are working on and which we always plan on, it's to have access to this information for all the parties. So right now, we are helping a buying organizations to gain a competitive advantage, correct? But
Mm-hmm.
at the end, there's also a supplier which you have to support. So what we are now introducing is the intelligence on both sides of the chain. Currently, we're working with our clients acting as buyers, helping improve their payment terms with their suppliers. But obviously, every company usually is also a supplier themselves. They're getting pushed on their terms from their customers. So we are offering now the same intelligence when they're dealing with their customers. And the key or the future solution which I'm looking at is giving access to this information, this transparency for all the parties involved. And then, for example, if you know, okay, my ideal terms, financing, etc., is at this level, and your client or your counterparty has the same information, then you can, based on this information, you can optimize. Maybe you are looking more for a better pricing, the other party maybe for more cash flow or liquidity. So you can optimize it based on your needs, but there is a clear optimum in this negotiation because both have access to the perfect information. And I think this is the key solution what we are aiming at. It will take some time, but we are on the right path with having currently data feeds with up-to-date information and from multiple different industries and countries feeding the model. The other thing or the other functionality which we are working on very hard right now, and we already started with 2 clients, is outsourcing the negotiations. Especially we discussed before the mid-market. The mid-market, maybe they have less people in purchasing or sales. They have to do with less, they have to do more, correct? So maybe when they have, let's say, 1,000 suppliers, they will not call 1,000 suppliers. They want to outsource some of these negotiations. And there we are now working on an automated AI-powered negotiation where maybe you can create emails or communication using AI, and maybe in the future using agentic autonomous negotiations where you can really focus on your core business, which is creating your specific products, your relationships, and not spending your time on negotiations.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the space is evolving so rapidly. For any business leaders who might be listening and might not have thought deeply about this yet, if there's a CEO or a CFO or procurement leader that's listening and wants to unlock cash flow without taking on more debt, what is the first thing that you would say they should look at?
So to answer your question, the first thing a company, a CEO should do when looking at this topic is high level. They should understand who are their peers, their competitors, correct, for maybe the different products, and then do a high level benchmark analysis. So looking at what payment terms these companies are having on average with their suppliers. The second step, because this first step will give them an idea, are they at the bottom line or are they the top performers, correct? Because if they are at the bottom line, there's a big risk that they are financing their competitors. They are financing the entire supply chain. Now, and if they're having the best terms, or if they are on the third quartile, then that means that they're doing well and there's nothing to be done, correct? But this gives them a very good perspective. Then, obviously, if there is an opportunity, then you have to look at specific categories. So let's say logistic or packaging or indirect spend, and then you will see then maybe different pockets of opportunities you can unlock. And for that, you need even more analytics and benchmarking. And for all these steps, yes, companies are working with us because unfortunately, this data is not publicly available.
That makes sense. Okay. Well, Oliver, I want to thank you for your great insights. You walked us through how companies can unlock cash flow with their existing payment terms. And, you showed us all the different negotiating tactics, told us the importance of data quality and showed us what the future looks like for the space as well, and why Calculum needs to be onboarded for every company out there. And, if people want to learn more about Calculum or connect with you, where can they do that?
Yeah, the easiest way is they visit our website, calculum.ai, or they find me on LinkedIn, Oliver Belin, and I 100% will always answer any request or connection. And yeah, look, the nice thing, to come back to your previous question, how a CEO usually starts, I can tell you how we start with companies which are interested in this topic. As we discussed today, it's all about the data. So we always start with a free or complementary POC, how we call it, a proof of concept, where any company can upload and share their names of trading partners, so suppliers or customer, and then we will provide them a free analysis and benchmarking of their payment terms. And then they see, is there an opportunity? Usually there is. And if yes, how much is it? And then they can make a business case. They can discuss it internally. And once they're ready, we would be happy to offer our data and insights for the company to gain a competitive advantage.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see Calculum keep growing and helping uh, so many companies with capital optimization. I want to thank you, Oliver, once again, and thank you to all our viewers. And we will see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.